Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
The legalization of recreational cannabis that went into effect last month can open doors for your career. If you are already in the industry or wondering what is the best path to break into the cannabis field, well, the University of Rhode Island has a program to help you become highly competitive in numerous areas of the cannabis industry. Fully accredited by URI's College of Pharmacy, the certificate program is 100% online and can be completed in 2 semesters. The next application date for the summer 2023 session is April 4th, and courses start on May 9th. Learn more at URI/online/cannabis or give them a call at 401-874-5280. All right, so one of the big stories this week is the departure, so to speak, of Housing Secretary Josh Saal. And look, he submitted his resignation. You know, you can make whatever you'd like out of any palace intrigue or behind the scenes chatter that's been going on in terms of the McKee administration or other public officials who have been, we'll say, dissatisfied with Josh's work as housing secretary in this newly created position. He's been on in sort of a housing czar role through the Commerce Department for a little bit. Someone who's been following this story very closely is Alexa Gagosz of the Boston Globe, who joins us right now.
Thanks so much, Bill, for having me on.
Of course. So take us through this saga, if you will, of Josh Saal, who has in many ways been the fall guy for anything that's gone awry in terms of housing, whether it's the homelessness crisis, whether it's the lack of affordable housing. He's been kind of the fall guy for months now, but it seems like there's more to this story than the surface level of just, yeah, he's going to be the punching bag and take the hit.
Yeah, definitely. So Josh Saal actually was appointed by the McKee administration as a deputy secretary of commerce under then Commerce Secretary Stephen Pryor. And the announcement was made in December of 2021. And people were really excited. This was something that advocates had been asking for a really long time. They wanted somebody who was going to be in charge of housing and homelessness at like a 20,000 foot view, basically. He started working for the state under the Commerce Department in January of 2022. And then he was elevated to a cabinet level secretary when that position was created in July of 2022. And that's thanks to some legislation that Speaker Shekarchi had introduced. And again, that was kind of met with this round of applause from housing advocates. People wanted this position. They still believe in this position, no matter who kind of is filling it at the time. But then the drama kind of began. And I had met Secretary Saal a few times. I'm a reporter that's been on this beat for over a year now. Him and I had gotten coffee, but it was in August of this past year. So of 2022, the governor had signed that bill saying that $250 million was going to be allocated for housing. It was a historic investment, kind of never been done before. And when I spoke to the secretary, I said, the public is wondering how much of this $250 million is going to go to development and how much of it is going to, or how much of that is going to create units and how many units, just, on a broad scale. And he said, well, the 90 million is what's important to look at. 90 million is going to create about 1,000 to 1,200 units. And obviously that was just a general estimate. And I asked, how are we going to get there? Is that going to be 1 bedrooms? Is it going to be 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? What are they going to look like? Where are they going to be? And obviously all those questions he could not answer at the time. But he said, stay tuned. We can't answer those questions until we have a statewide housing plan. Which we later find out is not true. That money is being allocated. It is moving. It is a slow process. But for the last few months, I think that there's been a lot of challenges that Josh Saal has had to come up against. And one of those is, having to submit these required reports that are outlined in the statute that created his role. And one of those is the integrated housing report. which was supposed to be submitted December 31st. And basically it's like a big data dump, as I'd like to say, of like where we are in the crisis. And it's basically a baseline of how we can measure progress. This is not a new report. It was submitted by Stephen Pryor with input from Saal last year. So like it's something that he is not independently counting how many units we have in each municipality, but it's something that he's getting information from the US Census on, Housing Works RI on, and if he had reached out to Rhode Island Housing, he could have gotten data from there. Instead, when he submitted the report, it was late. He never asked for an extension from the Speaker's office, which got him in a lot of trouble. And, it was missing some serious information that is publicly available online. So that's been a problem. And he also missed out on these recommendations that were required in the statute of how to really tackle the development issue. Second report, which was due November 1st, was his departmental organizational plan. He also submitted that 2 weeks late. It was due November 1st. He submitted it November 17th. He did ask for an extension, which the Speaker's office did grant him. And he was missing like broad swaths of this report. He was required to include input from the housing world, from advocates, from commissions, boards, agencies, and he just didn't do that. He said it's very clear in this report who I spoke to, but really this plan of like how this department was going to work wasn't really a plan. It said that, maybe he should be considered as Rhode Island Housing's chair, which is currently Jim Thorson, the director of the Department of Administration. It basically said that the HRC, which is the Housing Resources Commission, should go under the Housing Department. But it didn't actually do what the statute required, which was you need to include the advantages and disadvantages of each option that you're presenting from boards, commissions, agencies, et cetera. And he just didn't do that. He did not actually get input. He submitted it and then said, well, this is the final version.
What qualified Josh Saal to be housing secretary, or even in the context of deputy secretary of commerce for housing? I know you've done, or at least on Twitter, I saw you were doing some reporting on that and some digging. How did he get this gig?
Yeah, so when Josh Saal was hired, he was actually working in New York at the time, which is where he's from. He's from Scarsdale, New York, and he was working for New York City as a deputy director of pre-development in one of their many housing departments. New York City values housing as a priority, so they have a lot of people that are dedicated to it. And the division that he was in, it was kind of like a division of a division of a department. So I can't say, because I haven't been able to find out how many people he managed at the time, how collaborative he had to be. But when I did speak to somebody over there, they're actually the first deputy commissioner of New York City's Department of Housing, and they all oversaw Josh Saal's unit at the time. And he said in a statement to me that Josh Saal had direct impact in growing the city's affordable housing stock, which included coordinating across agencies and being, quote, one of the people laying the groundwork for nearly 8,000 affordable homes to be built across the city. And this is an exact quote from the first deputy commissioner. From our experience together, his commitment to delivering housing for those who need it is irrefutable. So, I mean, he had these glowing reviews from New York, but at the end of the day, Josh Saal was a planner, which is an important piece of being the housing secretary in Rhode Island. But he was a planner who regularly submitted RFPs, to try to get the development process going, identifying a developer to get funds out. But I mean, did he have to reach across agency lines? Did he have to work with advocates? Did he have to answer to advocates? Did he have to answer to the press or the public? I don't think so. I've done a lot of research into him, and I've never seen him quoted in a story in any of New York City's really fabulous outlets. So, I think that's a process that he definitely struggled with. Do I think that he could have remained Deputy Secretary of Commerce? I mean, that's not for me to decide. But he definitely had struggles for a position that, did ask a lot of somebody and continues to ask a lot of somebody.
Definitely was one of those characters in our world, in our orbit, that, whatever interview he was doing, whether it was in print with you or whatever, on radio, whatever the case may be, he wasn't in command of the interview at any point in time. And I think that was something that maybe was a skill set, like you said, that he just didn't have. And that expanded his problems, at least in terms of public perception. What did you find in terms of trying to get answers from Josh or his spokesperson, or anybody involved in this matter over the last several months, especially around the State House homeless camp, because that's really where I think this all flared up to, like, okay, this is now, rather than inside baseball, rather than governmental functions, this became like a 6 o'clock news, talk radio, print, daily coverage type of story.
Right, absolutely. And thanks for bringing up the State House encampment. When it comes to anyone that we're speaking to, I'm sure, Bill, that you could talk about this all day too. I mean, I think that it's really difficult for anyone to talk to the press unless they've been doing it for years. So I'm not going to hold that against anybody, but and that was a reason that I gave Secretary Saal so many chances to talk to me and just be honest about what's going on. And unfortunately, I just wasn't getting the answers that I needed. And when I did get answers, sometimes they would flip-flop over and over again. So, one day he would say something about a plan that seemed like it took a lot of time and investment to get toward. And then 10 days later, he would tell me something completely different. And that's something that I was constantly saying in interviews, like, you told me this 10 days ago, what's happening now? But I'm also seeing that when he had to testify in front of commissions and boards. When it came to the State House encampment, I think that everyone had a really hard time trying to get answers from him. I mean, I even saw him when he was being interviewed by Kim Clunian on WPRI. She asked him a yes or no question multiple times, asking, do we have enough shelter beds in this state to put everybody that's outside the State House encampment into a shelter if they want it? And he just wasn't answering that question. It's a yes or no question. And if you ask the Coalition to End Homelessness, their answer is no, we don't have enough shelter beds. The data that is currently being collected by them through the coordinated entry system, they have a contract with the state to run that, which creates the shelter priority list. It shows that hundreds of people every single winter, but especially now, are still waiting on shelter beds. So that answer is no at this point. I don't know why that question could not be answered.
I know. I think it may have been frustrating for some of the people in his orbit as well, that wasn't just communicated. Hey, look, we're not in the position that we need to be, and we're just going to work on it.
Right.
At least that would have been honest. Last question here. Where do we go from here? I've seen names floated like former Commerce Secretary Stephen Pryor. I saw Jennifer Rourke, the co-chair of the Rhode Island Political Cooperative and state Senate candidate. She kind of threw her name into the ring on Twitter. I mean, I've heard a number of different names for this role. How, in your opinion, does the talent search for this job go forward after you've got somebody in there, or you've had somebody in there that maybe, not that they weren't qualified, but maybe didn't have the right skill set, as you alluded to earlier, in terms of managing the advocate groups, in terms of working with the press? What do they do going forward in terms of finding the right person?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not the one that wrote this legislation that created this position or was one of the many advocates that advocated for it. I am just a reporter on the beat, but I will give one piece of advice to whoever is the next housing secretary, whether that's, just for a temporary time or if that's permanent going forward. When the press or the public is asking you a question, like, be as honest as you possibly can. Lying to us is not going to help your case, and it's not going to be good for the public. I mean, you're paid through taxpayer funds. Just be as honest and open as humanly possible. And housing and homelessness touches every single city and town in Rhode Island. So that's why we're on this beat constantly. Stephen Pryor, our former Commerce Secretary, has definitely had his name floated throughout the State House, especially in the governor's office, thinking of where he could go next. And I know that for the last couple of months, there was a rumor saying that he was going to be in charge of like the blue economy, possibly being a blue economy czar. Then I heard something like he would be a commissioner for the Rhode Island 2030 plan that McKee has been talking about a lot, which, yes, includes housing, but it also includes a lot of other things like education and, yes, blue economy, green economy, etc. Stephen Pryor is interesting because he has been in a number of different roles. I mean, he was appointed as Commerce Secretary and the first in Rhode Island by former Governor Raimondo in 2015. But before that, I mean, he had a huge career in Connecticut, where he was the Commissioner of Education. Before that, he was in New York. He was working at the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation. He basically was the one in charge as the president of that corporation to basically put together a plan, an economic and development plan to rebuild the World Trade Center site and the neighborhood around it. And before that, I mean, he was a founder of a charter school, and he's just got a lot of experience trying to bridge corporations and public agencies together to get things done. He's always been a key negotiator for big projects like the Superman building here in Rhode Island, or, Tidewater, et cetera. But I mean, even after those plans have been announced, there's been a lot of public outcry. Like we see that with the Superman building. So I think that no matter if it's him that takes over this role or if it's somebody else, they're going to have a huge task ahead of them. The housing secretary role is, I mean, you have to be a leader and wear many, many hats. You have to be able to work extremely hard and be able to listen when advocates are saying, we're not happy with this, or this isn't the way that it works. And I'm not saying that just because someone's not happy with something that an eventual housing secretary is going to make it happen. But at the end of the day, the reason why Josh Saal is no longer our housing secretary is because of A, a lack of communication, B, people were losing confidence in him, but C, because he just wasn't working with the community that's been on this for decades. And so whoever that is in the future, whether it's Stephen Pryor or if it's somebody else, they're going to have to just do a listening tour. They're going to have to sit in meetings and understand the statute that created this position and say, okay, I'm going to have to take inventory and see where the needs are. And there's a lot of them. And then we're just going to have to prioritize them. And that's just something that just hasn't been done over the last year right now.
Alexa Gagosz, the Boston Globe, Rhode Island, been all over the story. Make sure that you subscribe to the Globe and follow Alexa on Twitter and Globe RI on Instagram as well. And keep it up. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Bill.
If you have a question for the show, send me an email, bill@ripodcast.com, and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. Just search for Bill Bartholomew.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.